The grand ballroom sparkled with golden chandeliers that bathed the room in a soft, luxurious glow. Waiters glided gracefully between tables, serving champagne to the wealthiest guests in the city. It was the annual charity gala, an exclusive event where billionaires, celebrities, and the most influential figures gathered. Expensive gowns shimmered like liquid silver and gold under the light, and tuxedos were cut from the finest fabrics. No one ever dared to appear less than perfect at this gala. But that night, as the clock struck 8, the crowd's lively chatter softened. The massive double doors at the entrance opened, and in walked a young woman named Emily. Her presence didn't command attention at first. No sparkling jewelry, no designer handbag, no diamond-studded shoes. What she wore was a simple faded lavender dress that cost her only $10 from a thrift shop. The entire ballroom seemed to pause as heads turned toward her. Her dress wasn't new. The hem was slightly frayed, the fabric soft from years of wear. Yet there was something about her. The way she carried herself, the unshakable confidence in her stride, the quiet grace in her expression. She wasn't hiding behind brands or luxury. She was simply herself. At the center of the room near the stage stood Adrian Cole, the billionaire everyone admired. At just 34, he had built an empire in tech and finance. With his sharp suits and commanding presence, he was used to being surrounded by people trying to impress him. Yet as his gaze swept across the ballroom, it stopped when it reached Emily. Adrian couldn't explain why he was staring. Maybe it was her calmness in a sea of extravagance, or the way the soft lavender of her dress contrasted with the shimmering jewels of everyone else. Perhaps it was the spark of curiosity in her eyes, as though she wasn't there to impress anyone but herself. Emily, however, didn't notice him at first. She was focused on the purpose of the night, the charity auction that aimed to raise funds for orphaned children. Unlike most of the guests who came to flaunt their status, she was there because she truly cared. She had spent the past few years volunteering at a small shelter for kids and had saved every bit of her modest income to contribute to the cause. As the evening progressed, Adrian found himself unable to take his eyes off her. He noticed the way she smiled warmly at the servers, how she offered to help an elderly guest find a seat, and how she clapped genuinely at each speech given on stage. There was no pretense, no hidden agenda, something rare in his world of power and wealth. When the charity auction began, luxury items were paraded on stage: diamond necklaces, exclusive vacations, vintage cars. The bids shot up rapidly, numbers tossed around like spare change. Emily watched quietly, her heart sinking as the prices soared beyond her reach. Then came the final item. A small, framed watercolor painting created by a young orphan named Lily. The painting wasn't extraordinary by art world standards. It was simple. A sunny field, a small house, and 2 stick-figure people holding hands. But Emily recognized it. She had seen Lily paint it months ago at the shelter and remembered the little girl saying, "This is my dream home with the family I hope to have someday." When the bidding started, the crowd was quiet at first. A few guests raised their paddles, offering modest amounts compared to the previous items. Emily's heart raced as she clutched the small envelope in her hand. It contained the $50 she had saved for this very night. She raised her paddle, her voice barely audible as she bid. A few guests smiled politely, perhaps amused at her small offer in a room full of millionaires. But she didn't care about their smiles. To her, that painting was priceless because it carried a child's hope, Adrian noticed. He watched as Emily nervously increased her bid, outbidding people far wealthier than her until finally, she reached the limit of her savings. She hesitated, her hands trembling slightly as the auctioneer called for higher offers. Then Adrian did something that surprised even himself. He raised his paddle. The crowd gasped as the bidding suddenly jumped to an astronomical figure. It was clear he could easily outbid anyone in the room. Yet as his eyes met Emily's across the room, he gave her a small, almost reassuring smile as if to say, "I see why this matters to you." Emily lowered her paddle, a bittersweet ache in her chest. She couldn't compete with a billionaire, and she feared the painting would end up as just another decoration in a mansion. But when the auctioneer declared Adrian the winner, he did something even more unexpected. He stood up, walked to the stage, and after paying the winning bid, he turned to Emily. "This belongs to you," he said softly, handing her the framed painting. The room fell silent. Cameras flashed. Whispers spread across the gala as everyone watched in disbelief. But Emily barely noticed any of it. She looked at Adrian, her eyes wide with gratitude. For a moment it felt as though the glittering world around them had faded, leaving only the two of them standing there, a billionaire and a woman in a $10 dress. Later that evening, as the event wound down, Adrian approached Emily at the refreshment table. "You seem different from everyone else here," he said with a curious smile. Emily chuckled softly. "Different as in, not glamorous enough?" "No," Adrian replied, shaking his head. "Different as in, real. Most people come here to be seen. You came here to make a difference." They talked for a while about the shelter, about Lily's dreams, about life beyond the walls of luxury galas and high-rise offices. Adrian found himself drawn to her sincerity, something he hadn't felt in years. And Emily discovered that behind the billionaire's polished exterior was a man who still remembered growing up in a small, struggling neighborhood. Over the next few weeks, Adrian and Emily crossed paths more often. He began supporting the shelter, not with grand announcements or media attention, but with quiet donations and visits. Emily, in turn, showed him the joy of simple things, spending time with the kids, sharing meals that weren't served on silver platters, finding beauty in moments rather than material things. What fascinated Adrian most was that Emily never seemed impressed by his wealth. She didn't ask for expensive gifts or lavish dinners. Her focus remained on the children, on making a difference where it mattered. It made Adrian realize how rare it was to meet someone who wasn't dazzled by his billions. In time, their friendship grew into something deeper. It wasn't the kind of romance built on red carpets or magazine covers. Instead, it was quiet and genuine. Late-night conversations about dreams, shared laughter over simple jokes, and a mutual respect that went beyond appearances. At the next year's charity gala, Emily arrived once again in the same lavender dress. This time, the frayed hem had been neatly mended, and she wore a small pin shaped like a sunflower, a gift from the children at the shelter. When she stepped into the ballroom, all eyes turned to her again. But this time there was no whisper of surprise or disapproval. Instead, there was admiration. People had learned who she was, the work she had done, and the difference she had made. Adrian was waiting by the entrance. He extended his hand with a warm smile. "You look incredible," he said. Emily smiled back, her eyes sparkling. "It's still just a $10 dress," she teased. "And yet," Adrian replied, his gaze softening, "it's the most beautiful dress in this room." That night, as the gala raised record-breaking donations for the shelter and other causes, it was clear to everyone that the power of kindness, compassion, and authenticity could outshine even the brightest diamonds. Emily never became someone who fit the traditional mold of wealth or high society. She didn't need to. Her presence reminded people that true elegance isn't about price tags or labels. It's about heart. Adrian often said later that the night he first saw her in that thrift store dress changed his life. It wasn't the dress itself that captured his attention. It was the story behind it, the courage, the sincerity, and the unwavering spirit of a woman who refused to let circumstances define her worth. In a world obsessed with appearances, Emily and Adrian's story became a testament to something far more profound. Sometimes the most extraordinary people walk into our lives in the most unassuming ways. And sometimes all it takes to change a heart, even a billionaire's heart, is the quiet strength of someone who shows up as they truly are.